Dr. Leo Thompson, a seasoned veterinary surgeon, had just endured one of those days. Grumpy pet owners, stubborn animals, and a goat that refused to cooperate with anesthesia. By the time he got home, he was ready to collapse. But there, like a perfect antidote to the madness, stood his wife Amelia, holding a long, cool drink and wearing a warm smile. She'd set the table for two, candles flickering softly, the scent of garlic and basil in the air. Dinner was divine. A few shared laughs, a few more drinks, and they ended the night curled up in bed, finally at peace. Then, ring! Ring! Leo groaned, half-conscious, as he reached for the phone on the nightstand. "Hello?" he mumbled, trying to sound somewhat professional. "Is this the vet?" came a frail but urgent voice. "Yes, it is," Leo replied, sitting up. "Is this an emergency?" "Well, sort of," said an elderly lady. There's a whole gang of cats on my roof, making a terrible noise. Mating, I think, and I just can't sleep. What can I do to make them stop?" Leo sighed and rubbed his temple. It had been a long day, but he kept his tone gentle. "Okay, here's what you do. Open your window and shout that they are wanted on the phone." A pause. "Really?" the old woman asked, hopeful. "Will that actually stop them?" Leo let out a tired chuckle. "Well, it stopped me." During the height of the pandemic, Jack and his wife Olivia made a rare trip to the local supermarket to stock up on essentials. Hand sanitizer, masks, social distancing. They were following every rule in the book. As they reached the paper goods aisle, Jack triumphantly grabbed a pack of toilet paper like it was buried treasure. Just then, he glanced up and froze. A man was walking toward them. Without warning, Jack muttered something completely unintelligible, spun around, grabbed Olivia by the arm, and practically dragged her into the next aisle. She yanked her arm free and glared at him. "Jack, what the hell was that? You just made a scene. Everyone's staring at us." Jack leaned in and whispered, dead serious, "They said on the news this morning that one of the early symptoms of COVID is losing your sense of taste." Olivia blinked. "And?" Jack motioned toward the man in question. She peeked around the corner and gasped. The man was wearing neon green Crocs with socks pulled up to his knees, a Hawaiian shirt with cartoon pineapples, and a fedora. In winter. Olivia didn't say a word. She just turned and sprinted out of the store, heels clacking down the aisle like she was fleeing a zombie apocalypse. Jack adjusted his mask and said to no one in particular, "Told ya. Symptom number 1. Al, Ben, and Carl had been planning their ski weekend for months, but when they finally arrived at the remote mountain resort, they were met with a bit of a problem. "Sorry, gentlemen," said the receptionist. "We've only got one room left, and just one bed." The three looked at each other, shrugged, and decided they'd make it work. After a long day of carving slopes and nearly spraining everything they owned, they collapsed into bed. Al on the left, Ben on the right, and poor Carl stuck in the middle. The next morning, over a hot breakfast and sore muscles, Al leaned back and said with a dreamy grin, "Man, I had the most amazing dream last night. There was this stunning female ski instructor giving me the best handjob of my life, and get this, she was left-handed. Just like me!" Ben nearly dropped his fork. "No way. I had the same dream, only in mine she was right-handed." Carl went quiet. He stared down at his coffee for a moment, then said, "That's so weird. I didn't dream about a ski instructor. I dreamt I was in this intense downhill race. I was flying past everyone, about to win. And then, right before the finish line, my ski poles melted in my hands." Al, Ben, and Carl, three riders with very different styles, were attending a big riding convention in the city. Al specialized in comedy, Ben was known for horror, and Carl, well, Carl had a knack for heartbreak. They splurged on a luxury hotel suite, 3 bedrooms on the 75th floor with a view to die for. But when they returned from a long day at the convention, sweaty, tired, and loaded with free tote bags, the receptionist hit them with some bad news. "I'm terribly sorry, gentlemen," she said sheepishly. "All the elevators are out of order." The 3 of them stared at her. "So, we're walking up 75 floors?" Carl asked slowly, already regretting every life choice that led him here. "Afraid so," she said. After a moment of shared silence, Al clapped his hands. "All right, let's make this interesting. From floors 1 to 25, I'll tell funny stories to keep us entertained. Ben, you take 26 to 50 with your scary stuff, and Carl, you finish us off with your sad stories from 51 to 75. It seemed like a good idea at the time. As they climbed, Al had them in stitches. Tales of ridiculous characters, terrible puns, and disastrous dates. By the 25th floor, Ben and Carl were wheezing more from laughter than exertion. Then Ben took over. Ghosts in hotel bathrooms, writers who vanished after bad reviews, and a typewriter that typed by itself. By the 50th floor, Al and Carl were huddled together, eyes darting at every creak in the stairwell. Finally, Carl cleared his throat and said, "Now it's my turn. I'll start with the saddest story I've ever written." They braced themselves. Carl looked at them, dead serious. "There once were 3 writers," he began, "who climbed 75 floors, only to realize Carl left the room key in the car." An old man lay dying in bed upstairs in his room when he thought he caught a whiff of his wife's chocolate chip cookies wafting through the air. "Man," he thought to himself, "if I could have just one more of my wife's cookies, I could die a happy man." As he lay there thinking about the singular joy of those delightful cookies his wife had been making him so many years, he became certain that she was in fact making a fresh batch. He also became certain, no, he resolved himself, that he would not die until he had another cookie. He couldn't call out, as he'd been without voice for some time. He figured it was useless to hope anyone would just bring a dying man a cookie, so he decided that he would marshal all of what little strength he had left, and he would go downstairs and get one. He knew that this effort would be his last, but that having one last cookie before he went would be one of the happiest moments in his life. With a Herculean effort, the old man slid his feet out of the bed and to the floor. His legs didn't quite have the strength to carry him, and he slid all the way to the floor. He rested a minute, and then he turned over onto his stomach and crawled like an infant out of his room. Over to the stairs. The stairs presented the old man a special challenge. He couldn't crawl down them as his arms were not strong enough to do so. So with great effort, he got to his feet and leaned up against the rail and started making his way down. He almost gave up, but halfway down the stairs, the smell of the scrumptious chocolate chip cookies was so strong, he knew that he just couldn't quit. After about an hour, he made it safely to the bottom of the stairs, a mere 10 feet from the kitchen where his heavenly cookies awaited him. The old man crawled the last 10 feet. He could see stacks and stacks of sweet, delicious cookies on the kitchen table. He had almost no strength left at all, and he could feel the wind of death at his back. It was now or never. With great effort, he pulled his chest up onto the seat of the chair. He couldn't get any higher, but he reached out his left arm, an arm shaking side to side, up and down on its ascent to the tabletop. For a second, it didn't look like he'd even be able to grab a cookie, but somehow he managed. As he brought that glorious cookie down off that table and towards his dying lips, the old man's wife appeared and snatched the cookie right out of his hand, saying, "You stay out of these! These cookies are for the funeral!" It was finals week at Westwood University, and the atmosphere inside Lecture Hall 3B was thick with stress. Rows upon rows of students hunched over their desks, pens scratching feverishly against paper as they tackled the toughest exam of the semester. Half an hour into the exam, the heavy doors creaked open, and in stole a student. Late, calm, and wearing a grin that said he either knew something the rest didn't, or had already accepted his fate. The professor, a stern man with a salt and pepper beard and a reputation for zero tolerance, looked up from his desk and frowned. "Young man," he said pointedly, "this exam was designed to take exactly 1 hour. Showing up this late makes it highly unlikely you'll finish. I suggest you make peace with partial credit." Unfazed, the student gave a casual nod, took a copy of the exam, and slipped into an empty seat. Without a word, he got to work. As the clock ticked on, students began to sweat bullets. It became clear that the exam was far more difficult than expected. Even the brightest were scrambling to finish. When the hour was up, the professor stood and called out, "Time's up. Place your papers on the desk in a neat stack, no exceptions." Grumbling and sighing, the students filed down, each placing their test on the growing pile. All except one. The late student kept writing, cool as ever. The professor glared at him. "Young man," he said with irritation, "some credit is better than no credit. If you want to pass this course, I suggest you stop writing now." But the student just glanced up with that same half-smile, then went right back to scribbling. 15 minutes later, the lecture hall was empty, except for the professor, gathering papers, and the lone student finally capping his pen. He stood, stretched slightly, and strolled to the desk, completed exam in hand. The professor raised an eyebrow. "I'm sorry, but I clearly stated your test would not be accepted. You had fair warning." The student stood firm. "Sir, do you know who I am?" The professor blinked. No, I don't." The student smiled wider. "Good," he said, and with that he slid his test into the middle of the pile, gave the stack a good shuffle, scattering papers everywhere, and bolted for the door. Father O'Brien wasn't feeling quite himself. Tired, tense, and worn thin from the duties of tending to his flock. So, on the advice of a concerned parishioner, he paid a visit to the local doctor. After a thorough checkup, the doctor leaned in with a gentle tone and said, "Father, you're showing signs of stress, high blood pressure, fatigue. You need to relax a little. Maybe have a drink now and then." Father O'Brien sat bolt upright. "Oh, no, doctor. Mrs. Brown, the dear lady who keeps the rectory, is fiercely opposed to alcohol. She wouldn't hear of it." The doctor smiled knowingly. "Then she doesn't have to know. Just keep a small bottle of whiskey with your shaving supplies. Each morning when you shave, pour yourself a little dram. It'll help ease the nerves." Father O'Brien looked uncertain, but nodded. A few weeks later, the doctor happened to be strolling through the village when he spotted Mrs. Brown standing outside the general store, waiting patiently as Father O'Brien popped inside. "Good afternoon, Mrs. Brown," he greeted her warmly. "How's Father O'Brien feeling these days?" Mrs. Brown beamed. "Oh, doctor, it's like a miracle. There's a spring in his step again, a twinkle in his eye, color in his cheeks. He is like a new man since seeing you." The doctor smiled, pleased. "That's wonderful to hear." She leaned in, her smile faltering slightly. "There is one thing, though. Well, I think he might be going a bit senile." The doctor's eyes widened. "What makes you think that?" Mrs. Brown frowned. "Well, he's started shaving 7 or 8 times a day. Every evening after work, like clockwork, a man walks into his favorite bar and orders 6 shots of whiskey. He doesn't talk much, just nods to the bartender, downs his drinks one by one, and quietly heads home. One night, the man comes in, looking particularly rough around the edges. He orders his usual 6 shots, knocks them back, then sighs and tells the bartender, "This has been the worst week of my life, and today's the worst day of the whole lot." The bartender, sympathetic, pours him 6 more. The man drinks them down just as fast, then stumbles out into the night. The next evening, he walks into the bar, but this time, something's different. No whiskey tonight, he says, just a Diet Pepsi. The bartender, surprised, asks, Everything okay? Giving up the drink? The man nods solemnly. Yeah, I'm never drinking again. Last night, I got home, and I was rolling around on the floor, blowing chunks. The bartender leans in, nodding knowingly. Oh, buddy, happens to the best of us. That's just what too much whiskey will do. Doesn't mean you have to quit for good. The man shakes his head. No, you don't understand. Chunks is my dog. It was 3 o'clock in the morning when loud, frantic knocking jolted Jack and Amelia from their sleep. Jack groaned and shuffled out of bed, half asleep and not in the mood for anything heroic. He opened the front door to find a soaking wet man swaying slightly in the rain, clearly drunk and wearing a lopsided grin. Hey, mate, the man slurred. Can you give me a push? Jack blinked at him in disbelief. Are you insane? It's 3 in the morning, he barked, slamming the door without another word and storming back to bed. Amelia stirred. Who was it? Just some drunk guy asking for a push, Jack grumbled. Did you help him? No, it's the middle of the night and pouring rain. Amelia sat up, arms crossed. You've got a short memory. Don't you remember 3 months ago when we broke down and those 2 guys stopped to help us? You said you'd never forget that kind of kindness. Jack winced. She had him there. With a frustrated sigh, he threw off the covers, got dressed, and trudged back into the rain, calling out into the dark. Hello? You still out here? A voice called back. Yes. You still need a push? Yes, please. Jack looked around, confused. Where are you? There was a pause, and then, over here, on the swing. Bob, a wealthy American businessman in the construction game, flew to Mexico for a high-level conference. While there, he met Seb, a fellow construction mogul, but from the Mexican side of the border. The two hit it off right away, bonding over big bills, steel prices, and stories of corrupt city inspectors. At the end of the trip, Bob clapped Seb on the back and said, You're my kind of guy. Come visit me in the States. I'll show you how we do things up north. A month later, Seb took him up on the offer. When he landed at the airport, a stretched limousine was waiting. It whisked him through the suburbs to Bob's estate, an elegant 2-story house with white pillars, sprawling horse stables, and a view that screamed money. They shared a fine steak dinner, and after a few glasses of bourbon, Bob led Seb upstairs to the balcony. From there, they overlooked a busy turnpike, glowing with headlights. You see that toll booth down there? Bob said, grinning. 10% of everything that rolls through goes straight into my pocket. Seb nodded slowly, impressed. Very nice, amigo. A few months later, it was Seb's turn to host. Bob arrived in Mexico to find a private helicopter waiting on the tarmac. It lifted him over lush green hills and sprawling estates, finally landing on the rooftop helipad on the 3rd story of Seb's massive mansion. The place was something else. Exotic animals roamed the grounds like they owned the place. Lions, tigers, even a couple of flamingos standing by the pool like they were guests. After an opulent dinner, Seb took Bob up to the rooftop balcony. They gazed out over the night as the jungle rustled quietly below. You see that beautiful autopista highway down there? Seb asked, gesturing proudly. Bob squinted into the darkness. No, I don't see anything. Seb smiled and said, Exactly, 100%, straight to my pocket. After a long and exhausting day filled with barking dogs, limping horses, and one surprisingly feisty parrot, Dr. Martin, the local veterinarian, finally came home. His wife greeted him at the door with a warm smile, a long, cool drink, and a romantic candlelit dinner that instantly soothed his frayed nerves. They laughed over pasta, clinked glasses, and after a couple more drinks, drifted off to bed in happy exhaustion. Sometime around 2 a.m., the phone rang. Martin groaned and fumbled for it, nearly knocking over the bedside lamp. "Hello?" he mumbled, still half asleep. "Is this the vat?" came the shaky voice of an elderly woman. "Yes, ma'am, it is," Martin replied, already trying to shake off sleep. "Is this an emergency?" "Well, sort of," she said. "There's a whole bunch of cats on my roof, making a terrible racket. Mating or fighting, I don't know. I can't get a wink of sleep. What can I do about it?" Martin let out a slow breath and rubbed his eyes. Then, with the patience only a man who works with animals and people all day can muster, he said, "Open the window and yell that they're wanted on the phone." There was a pause. "Really?" she asked. "Will that actually stop them?" Martin yawned and muttered, "It stopped me." A guy had a dog with a bad habit. It kept sneaking into the neighbor's yard, digging holes, and terrorizing the poor man's pet rabbit. One day, the neighbor storms over, red in the face, banging on the door. "Your dog's been in my yard again, digging holes and scaring my rabbit. Next time, I swear, I'll shoot that mutt." "Sorry, neighbor," the man says. "I'll make sure to keep him pinned up." The next day, he's outside calling for his dog when it comes crawling out from under the neighbor's fence, dirt all over its snout and, oh no, a dead rabbit in its mouth. Panicking, the guy snatches the rabbit, rushes it inside, gives it a quick bath, blow-dries the fur, fluffs it up nice and neat, and then under the cover of guilt, sneaks over and places the rabbit gently back in its cage before the neighbor gets home. To cover his tracks, he grabs his dog, hops in the car, and drives around until the neighbor's back from work. As he returns, he spots the neighbor standing in the front yard, scratching his head with a confused, almost haunted look. "Everything okay, neighbor?" he asks, trying to play it cool. The neighbor shakes his head slowly. "My rabbit died yesterday." "Oh, I'm sorry to hear that." "Yeah, but what I don't understand is, someone dug it up, fluffed it up, and put it back in the cage." A man left a note for his wife on the dining table before heading out for the evening. It read, "My dear wife, you'll surely understand that I have certain needs that you, being 54 years old, can no longer satisfy. I am very happy with you and I value you as a good wife. Therefore, I hope you won't take it the wrong way when I tell you that I'll be spending the evening with my 18-year-old secretary at the Comfort Inn. Please, try not to be upset. I'll be home before midnight." He returned home later that night to find this note waiting for him. "My dearest husband, I received your letter. Thank you for your honesty. As you rightly noted, I am indeed 54 years old. However, I'd like to remind you that you are also 54. As a math teacher at the local college, I'm sure you'll appreciate this little lesson in arithmetic. While you're with your 18-year-old secretary, I'll be at the Hotel Fiesta with Michael, one of my students, also 18, and the assistant tennis coach. Now here's the fun part. As someone skilled in numbers, you'll understand that 18 goes into 54 a lot more times than 54 goes into 18. Therefore, darling, I won't be home until sometime tomorrow." Jack's grandfather left him $10 million, and the next week, Diane agreed to marry him. After 3 months of married life, Jack noticed that his beautiful new wife was ignoring him more and more. On the rare occasion that she would go to bed with him, she would be indifferent. Or, even worse, called out other men's names. Whenever they went out in public, she ignored him and flirted with other men. Finally, he decided to confront her. "Diane," he said, "the only reason you married me was because my grandfather left me $10 million when he died." "Don't be ridiculous," she replied. "I don't care who gave you the money." It was just past 2 a.m. when Amelia was jolted awake by the creak of the front door. She groaned and glanced at the clock. Her husband Jack was finally stumbling in from another one of his mysterious boys' nights. She lay still, pretending to be asleep, listening as his heavy footsteps echoed through the hallway. each step sounding more unsteady than the last. Then came the thudding up the stairs. Slow, uneven, and suspiciously muffled. Moments later, he appeared in the doorway, illuminated by the soft hallway light. But he wasn't alone. He stood there, swaying slightly, with a sheep tucked under one arm like it was the most normal thing in the world. Amelia sat up, eyes wide. "Jack, do you have any idea what time it is? And what in God's name is that doing in our bedroom?" Jack leaned against the doorframe, clearly drunk, his eyes barely open. "This," he slurred, patting the sheep affectionately, "is the pig I've been sleeping with for the last 5 years." Amelia's jaw dropped. "Jack, you drunk idiot! That's a sheep!" Jack blinked at her, mildly annoyed, then looked down at the sheep. "I wasn't talking to you," he muttered. Jack was the kind of husband who believed that DIY stood for "Don't involve yourself." So, when Amelia noticed the kitchen sink had sprung a leak, she turned to him hopefully. "Jack, honey, the sink's leaking. Can you take a look at it?" He barely glanced up from the couch. "What do I look like, a plumber?" She sighed and walked away. A few days later, she noticed the living room carpet was looking more like a doormat. Threadbare and tired, she called out, "Jack, can we go pick out a new carpet? This one's on its last legs." Jack didn't even pause his game. "What do I look like, a carpet layer?" Strike two. The very next day, Amelia heard the forecast. Heavy rain on the way, and just as she looked up, a fresh drip fell from the ceiling. "Jack, there's a leak in the roof. Can you at least help with this before it pours inside?" Jack grunted. "What do I look like, a roofer?" By this point, Amelia had heard enough. The next day, Jack came home and did a double take. The sink? Fixed. Carpet? Replaced. Roof? Bone dry. He blinked. "Hey, did you fix all this yourself?" "Nope," Amelia replied, casually flipping through a magazine. "I asked a guy named Don from down the road. He did it all." Jack's eyes narrowed. "Really? What'd he charge?" "Oh, nothing," she said sweetly. "He said he'd do it for free if I either baked him a cake or slept with him." Jack sat up, alarmed. "So what? What kind of cake did you bake him?" Amelia looked him dead in the eye and said, "What do I look like? Betty Crocker?" When Amelia decided it was finally time to recarpet the house, she called up a local dealer who offered in-home consultations. That afternoon, a friendly man with a notepad and a measuring tape showed up, all business. "In the living room?" Amelia began. "I'd like a nice beige carpet. Something to match the table." The man nodded, jotted it down, walked over to the window, opened it, and shouted, "Green side up!" Amelia blinked. A bit odd, she thought, but maybe it was just some kind of industry code. They moved to her son's room. "For here. I'm thinking a soft pale blue. It'll calm him down, I hope." Again the man nodded, wrote it down, went to the window and shouted, "Green side up." Now she was getting curious, but she didn't want to sound nosy. Maybe it was just carpet slang? Finally, they entered the master bedroom. "In here, I'd like a rich, deep brown, something elegant." The man wrote it down, walked straight to the window, and, you guessed it, called out, "Green side up." Amelia couldn't take it anymore. "Okay," she said, hands on her hips. "I've asked for beige, blue, and brown carpets. What on earth does green side up have to do with any of that?" The man looked mildly surprised, then chuckled. "Oh, sorry for the confusion. I've got a team of blondes laying sod at the house across the street." Amelia and Jack had finally decided to freshen up their home before the baby arrived. They hired a local contractor named Leo, who came highly recommended, if not a bit quirky. As Leo arrived, the couple greeted him warmly and started the tour upstairs. "This will be the nursery," Amelia said with a smile. We were thinking a soft blue for the walls. We've got a baby boy on the way. Leo nodded, scribbled something in his notebook, then casually walked over to the bedroom window, opened it, and shouted, "Green side up!" Jack and Amelia exchanged a quick look, puzzled, but didn't say anything. Maybe it was contractor talk. Next up, the living room. "We'd love a warm baize in here," Jack said. "Something that makes guests feel welcome." Again, Leo made a note, then headed to the window and bellowed, "Green side up!" This time, Amelia raised an eyebrow. "Is that some kind of painter's code?" she whispered to Jack. In the kitchen, Amelia pointed at the walls. "And for here, we were thinking a muted yellow, nothing too bright." Leo smiled, jotted it down, walked to the window, and once more shouted, "Green side up!" That was it. Jack couldn't help himself. "All right," he said. "We've shown you 3 different rooms, asked for 3 completely different colors, and every time you shout, 'Green side up!' out the window. What's going on?" Leo laughed sheepishly. "Oh, sorry. I've got a couple of blondes laying sod in your front yard. I just need to keep reminding them which side faces up."